So, if you have any interest in a self awareness retreat, a 3 night, 3 day retreat, either in the Washington, D.C. or the Philadelphia region, go to my website, ThisIsLeslyn.com, and in the header is the This Is Me weekend retreat link, and there's a little interest form. So, Tommy, you had a mother that probably never spoke 1,000 words. I'm sorry. And Tommy, that's really sad. I hope that you take the time to learn how that impacted you and get really clear and just in your own mind on how that kind of generates thoughts, feelings, and behaviors so that when you go out into the world, you have a better understanding. What does it mean if a guy asks about your living situation? It means that he's having conversation with you. I don't want to imply that there's any other meaning. You know, I think it's just an interesting question. Do you have a roommate? Are you living with friends? Do you live with your parents? Like, what's the deal? So you graduated from college and now what? What's going on? I think that's just conversation, Lily. Don't turn it into anything more or less than it is until it starts getting weird and creepy. And if it gets weird and creepy, don't answer any more questions. That's my take on it, at least. Just wondering if it's ever okay to raise your voice like to a client, like, hello, Radar. Like the therapist raised his or her voice to the client in an angry kind of way. I mean, ideally, I would tell you that, wow, I would say absolutely not. No, that's not okay. I would say that, I mean, I'm pretty authentic and expressive. And there have been a few times when I've been expressive in a session, like just spontaneously, like I can't even think of, oh, no, 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 no. Like maybe I've done that. Oh, but it's always been in like alignment with my client. I've never, well, that's not true. Remember, you guys, I did that one video that got so much, that went viral about the client who called his wife an FNC. I had to raise my voice and said, hold up. You don't get to talk like that in here. I did do that then under those conditions. And because he was yelling, or I kind of elevated my voice to match his, but I can't. Is there an intervention or a technique that uses that? Were you yelling? I mean, or was the client yelling? Hello, Claudia. I am. I hope you are too. Um, yeah. Um, Radar. I mean, it is. There are times, right? And I honestly, I can't. With the exception of that one time, I had a client beat his head against the wall once, but I don't think I yelled. As a matter of fact, I think my instinct in that moment is to go very, very quiet so that they're coming down. I mean, I honestly cannot think of another instance when I would be loud to a client. Do I mean a form of therapy? You're a client, the therapist yelled at you. I cannot imagine that for a second, to be honest. And obviously, I don't know the context, but I don't even know if there's a context that would make that okay. Yeah. I mean, why would a therapist yell? That's not. Listen, you guys. I made some content about this today. There is, I mean, I know we're all human, but that's right, Sharisa. And Nick, okay, I'm getting confused. So Nick, your therapist yelled at you because you were giving her the silent treatment and she told you to act like an adult. You were 15. What? Yeah. Listen, when you're a therapist, on perspective, Leslyn and I have spoken. I thought she was yelling, but she was not. That's true. That's true. Well, it takes, you know what it does, Radar, is it takes someone, I think it takes someone who has self-control. I mean, Sharice's right. I mean, when I get passionate about something, I can get loud. But there's a big difference between yelling at someone and escalating the decibel is out of excitement for you. Yeah, I mean, you're in New Jersey. That's how you talk. And I agree. I don't think things need to go there. It took some talking through to understand each other. Leslie can yell at me. And just to be clear, Sharisa is not my client. Sharisa is my friend. And so it wasn't a professional relationship where we had to get that dynamic worked out. So just to be clear, that's what I meant about being correct. You can be loud but not yell. Exactly. But to talk to your therapist about that. I mean, ideally, Noreen, ideally, you would go in and say, in our last session, the way I perceived your tone was that you were yelling, and I don't find that acceptable. And ideally, but that would be the super healthy thing to do, right? Is to go in there and to be open to the confrontation in a safe place with a safe person. But you have to feel safe. And you might even go in and start with that, right? You might even go in and say, in our last session, I didn't feel safe. And I'd like to talk about it, but I would like some assurance that it's going to be safe to do so. And that might be a good, it might be good for her too, or him, whoever it was. And I've had people come back and say, in our last session, I didn't feel heard. And I want my clients to be able to kind of address that. I think that's actually super healthy. You did say to her, she said she was challenging me, but you think it was countertransference. It could have been, man. And I'm trying to sit here and remember. I do remember apologizing to a client once for having a reaction, but I can't remember the circumstances. And I don't know if I was just having like a reaction to what they were talking about or if it was to them personally, but I honestly don't remember. I remember literally less than a handful in almost 15 years of being reactive to the person. As a therapist, Caitlin, yes. I mean, I think overall, yes. You know what it is? They're everybody's conversations with me, generally speaking, are like puzzles. And I know I've talked about this before, but I love puzzles. And so when people are giving me all the tea about, what's going on, and I get to see their reactions and how they think about it, it's like a puzzle, and it's just more information and it's more data about this individual and what they think and how they feel and how they react. Um, and so, yeah, I do. I've had, today's just Monday, is that right? Ugh. I saw 7 people today, so I feel like it was a couple days worth of work. Um, but 2 different clients today had very distinct aha moments. And I just love that. And um, I just love it. So, and Amy, being an empath can definitely embody empaths can definitely embody qualities that it takes to be a good counselor. Um, I think empaths have to be very, very careful about not taking on the energy of clients. And it's one thing to be an empath, and it's a whole nother thing to be empathetic. Empaths have to learn very, very strict boundaries. When I've talked to clients before, have they ever brought up people that you personally know? Yes. As you know, Lauren, um, it's especially 15 years ago, it was a much smaller community. And my kids were really active in the school system and in sports. And so I was pretty involved. And so I quite often would hear things about people that I knew, um, but I would never let on that I knew the people they were talking about. But sometimes just because, people would say, well, my neighbor, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, mm, hmm. But I knew exactly who they were talking about. Or, every once in a while, people will come in and they'll be best friends with somebody or arch enemies of somebody who's a different client of mine. And I think I've mentioned before that I had somebody not too long ago that started talking, and we were probably 45 minutes into the session, and she started talking about her boyfriend. And I'm like, there's no way that has happened to more than one. She described this unique situation, and it was so unique that there's no way that could have happened to 2 people or more than 2 people in the same month. There's just no way. So I stopped and I said, who is your boyfriend? And she told me, and I said, I'm really sorry, but I can't work with you, because because I couldn't. And she was too closely connected to another client. But it was, that's only the second time in 15 years that's happened. So it was awkward, but it was too close. And some of the things that were a part of her challenges were connected to the thing that I was working on the close person with. And so if they're totally disconnected, I will sometimes take that on. But if they're connected, I can't. Then it's a conflict of interest. And so I had to refer her out. And I could just tell when we talked, that she just was deflated. And it was really very sad because she was a lovely person and I wanted to be able to work with her and help her, but it just was unethical at that point. And, in that point, because of confidentiality, you can't tell her why specifically. All I could say was, I've been able to identify that you are closely connected with someone else that I work with, and that creates a conflict of interest. And so I can't say anything else than that. And it's a horrible feeling, because then that leaves her feeling confused and potentially abandoned. But I just on the spot called a colleague of mine and said, do you have an opening next week? I have a client, and I set her up with that. I'm pretty sure she never followed through, but that's at that point, that's all you can do. You know what else is interesting though, Lauren, is often people don't tell me, like they may know. Here, let me give you an example. I have an existing client who referred me to a neighbor. The neighbor came in, never told me that neighbor never told me that they'd been referred. But then the original client often says, well, my neighbor. And I'm like, and honestly, I didn't know, because I originally didn't know that the neighbor had been referred, if you follow my drift. So for a long time, the original client would say, well, my neighbor. And I'm like, I was so confused for a while. I've also, because I've been in practice long enough, had people come in who say, hey, I think I went to school with one of your kids. And so that's probably a little bit more common. And so, of course, then I am just making sure that people know that I don't talk about my clients to my kids. And especially if you tell me that I'm just like tight-lipped. I would never, like every once in a while I come home and say, I had this really cute new client today I'm so excited to work with. But I don't even do that if you tell me that. Of course, now I come home to an empty house. But if you tell me that you've known somebody that is in my family. And there's this other time this person came in, and see, this happens a lot. Like people know about me from some other place in the community, but I don't know them. So this person came in and is talking, and somehow, like all of a sudden, I knew who he was. So Harlan had this young man come into the print shop. So the print shop and my office are connected, right? And so Harlan ran a small print shop, and he had this kid come in, this young man come in and talk to him all the time. And Harlan loved this. I'm going to call him a kid, because to Harlan he was a kid, but he's probably 40. And I can't really share any additional information, but Harlan talked about this kid all the time. And they just had a special connection. And when Harlan was sick, this guy gave Harlan a gift and then came to visit him. And Harlan wanted, I think I can say this, wanted to spend kind of like one last just hurrah with this person that he'd made such a connection with. And so Harlan bought a very expensive tree tent. It's a long story, but just know that Harlan bought this super expensive tree tent and then said, I guess like the guy never got to come back, and he said, make sure you give this tent to so and so. Well, I didn't know the guy's last name, and his first name is a very common name. And I'm like, well, I don't know what to do. So I just I just put this tent aside, and lo and behold, here it is, like 2.5 years later. And this guy books an appointment online, comes in, sits down, starts talking. And then he tells me he knew Harlan. And I'm like, you did? Oh, I really miss him, blah, 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 blah. And hello, Stories, how are you? And then he said something else, and it was like this light bulb. I'm like, oh, you're him. Oh my God, you're him. I have something for you. And that was really actually kind of cool, because I felt like I got to honor Harlan's wishes. And all of a sudden, my brain is just flooding with information that Harlan had shared over the years about this person, which was interesting, because there's a fine line there between what you need to ethically kind of share that and what was just Harlan's opinion. So it was so emotional. Like, that was one of those moments when I just kind of stepped back as a therapist, and for a minute we just bonded on our love for Harlan. So it was super emotional. And yeah, that was pretty cool, actually. Oh, Brett is her name. Okay. So what did you say? I don't know. Brett mixes in the mothering. Oh man, now I'm having to decode Nick's language. But thank you for clarifying. She does the therapy, and sometimes I feel like she'd be mixing in the mother. I don't know a therapist who is a mother who doesn't do that. Because I think there's a very fine line sometimes, especially with younger people, by the way. And for me, everybody's younger. But there's sometimes a very fine line, right, between being an encouraging, emotional support person and a mother. That's what a mother is, a good mother, at least. And obviously, sometimes I'll say, listen, the mother in me has this to say, and the professional in me has this to say. Because there is an appropriate distinction between the two, obviously. But I do think that when you're a mother, I feel like I'm the mom to this live group. Thanks. Cheers, Lois. Thanks, Lauren. Actually, that's a good comment. Cheers, Lois. How are you? I hope that you're well. It's a little after dinner time for you, huh? I think that's great. It feels like a safe amount. Good. Yeah. I think one of my experiences is that so many people who come to therapy, at least in my practice, have mothers who may have fallen a little bit short or go overboard on some things. And in a lot of ways, I think that I can fill a void in that space. And it's the validation space, it's the what's the word I want? Validation. There's some other word I want like that. Um, Acceptance. Thank you. It's that acceptance space, right? Like so many of us just want our moms to accept who we are. And yes, thank you, Julie. It is exactly that unconditional positive regard. It's the acceptance that you're amazing. You're amazing just the way you are. Isn't that a song? Yes, Janetta. Hi. Some of the, yes, some of that nurturing space. Thank you, ladies. I think that, yeah, Claudia, it does figure it. It is so hard. So I think a therapist who can be that space for you. Hello, Care. You guys are just popping up for that. From anyone. Care, you can get it here. You just pop in here and we will give you that kind of unconditional positive regard. I'm I'm instantly thinking about a woman that I've been working with for just about exactly a year. I think our year anniversary is coming up. And she did not have really anyone in her life. She did live with a mother. She lived with a woman who birthed her, and that was it. And she grew up believing that her mother's problems were also her problems, that her mother's unworthiness, if you will, were automatically parlayed to her. And I guess the mom was like the black sheep of the family. And so my client just believed that she was also the black sheep, and there was just no nurturing. No nurturing. There was no teaching. There was no validation. And I really think that for a solid year, that's in many, many ways the role that I've taken on in her life. And she's well into adulthood now. And so I am the stable shelf. Hello, Sess. I am that stable, validating, safe space in lots of ways, just to teach her that she's worthy, just to get her to see these things. And she's made some amazing progress too. The young man that that talked about Elise Myers, and this young woman that I've been working with, I picked both of them up as clients about this time last year, and both of them have similar issues, and it's truly been my pleasure to watch them bloom into just like people who are starting to see themselves. It's, that's why I do what I do. Yeah. And stability wise, they know that I show up every week for them. They know that they never get judgment from me. They know that I will give them an honest answer. Am I the same person in session? I'd say I'm the same person. I don't drink wine in my sessions. That's different. And I'm not quite as vulnerable or as I do use self-disclosure, but not randomly, right? If I thank you, Care. If I engage in self-disclosure with my clients, it's because something about what I'm sharing is poignant to their where they are in that moment in time. You love it if your therapist drank wine. Lots of people say, pour a glass, especially in telehealth, they say, well, we're drinking wine, and they'll say, you can do that. But, yeah, I'm very tempted sometimes, but I don't. Anyway, if I'm using self-disclosure in a session, I am doing it very specifically to address a point, whereas like here or with my friends, I'm just an open book, and I share freely, and so that's very different. So it's my wine consumption and my sharing. You don't necessarily know the clients when you're taking them on. People don't always show you their whole selves right from the beginning. Like, remember earlier I said something about the client that was beating his head against the wall? That was 3 or 4 months into our work together. And yeah, kind of like a honeymoon phase. And he was bipolar. He'd been in a manic phase when we first met, and then eventually went into this depressive phase. And as he was coming out of that depressive phase, he was wild. That was the one and only time I had to call the police during a session. And that was tough. I don't like that kind of stuff. And there have been a few people through the years that I thought, do I need to look over my shoulder? One guy, I remember probably 10 years ago, somebody, Lauren, he actually ran. And so the police came and said, what happened, blah, blah, blah. And I told him, and they actually found him, brought him back, asked me if I wanted to 503 or 506, whatever number that is. And by then his wife was there, and she said she would take responsibility for him and that he wasn't going to hurt himself. So that's such a symptom of somebody who is hurting, right? And I just have so much Janetta, here that's different. It's definitely ends in 6. 506, I want to say, but that number doesn't sound familiar. So I was in Pennsylvania at the time. And so it's probably different, right, in every state. Did you continue seeing him? I did, yes. Hello, Court. Crossed boundaries and lost therapist forever. Um, are you saying that your therapist crossed boundaries or that you crossed boundaries? Um, it's so interesting. You crossed the boundaries and lost the therapist forever. Hmm. When a client crosses boundaries with me, I address that. Like, I I I understand that that can be challenging, but some people have no ideas. No people. Some people have no idea what a boundary is, right? Or that there even are boundaries. I mean, people ask me personal questions all the time. If I'm comfortable with the question, I'll answer it. Otherwise, I have a very standard canned response of why is that answer important to you? Let's see, Caitlin, an example of a client crossing a boundary. Um, I had a client say to me once, I'm trying to think, I'm pretty sure it was after Harlan got diagnosed and I was seeing him to, like, he was getting a divorce and he was like on the other end of his divorce. Harlan had just been diagnosed, and I don't know how that came up in our session, but I think I mentioned that my partner had gotten diagnosed with terminal cancer. And his comment was, you know, after your partner passes, if you ever want to go out, I'd be up for that. I'm like, so, you know that can't happen. First of all, we're clients. Secondly, he's still very much alive and a part of my life. Um, I think another thing is when a client asks me to be friends on Facebook. I have a professional page and I have a personal page, and I don't share. I don't accept friendships from active clients. And I would even say most ex-clients on Facebook, if it's been 5 or 6 years since we've had an active client relationship, sometimes I will say yes to the request. Otherwise, I just let people know that that's a boundary. Um, and other boundary violations are like asking me, calling me at 11 o'clock at night for kind of a silly question. Um, but then I always say when I do supervision with new therapists, I always tell them it's your responsibility as a therapist to let a client know where the boundary is, because many of our clients come in not understanding boundaries. We're responsible for establishing what those boundaries are. And oftentimes the boundaries are not paying the bill, showing up late, canceling at the last minute, texting inappropriately, meaning like at all hours of the day, being angry that you didn't get back to them soon enough, calling too late at night, calling you on the weekends, those asking you to get them in this week, like fervently. So those are the kinds of things where it's the therapist's job to establish the boundaries and talk to the client about it, right? I try to make sure that I represent myself really professionally. This is my career, it's my job. I depend on this revenue to pay my bills the way you get your paycheck from your job. And I just think those are the kinds of things that are very easily broken when the therapist is bouncy with that. I basically tell my clients that as long as you don't take advantage of it, I'm willing to talk to you on the phone for 10 or 15 minutes without charging you. If we talk for 20, 25, 35, 40 minutes, I'm going to charge you. If we're on the phone for 15 minutes, I'm going to ask you if you want to keep going so that it's not a surprise, letting you know that maybe we should book a session. I don't talk to people on the weekend. If I get a text or an email and it's a really short, respectful kind of thing, then I'll either answer it or say, let's touch base on Monday. Hello, Bumblebee. If somebody just continues to cancel at the last minute, every one of my clients has tons of warning that they have to cancel within 24 hours. Not only is it in the consent agreement, they get an email that says it, they get a text message that says it, they get so many opportunities to cancel. And so I tell them that if you cancel the day of, you get charged. But I even do this. Almost every week I have a waiting list. So I said, if I can replace the appointment, I will not charge you. If I can get you in later in the week, I will not charge you. So I am as flexible as I can be, but if none of those things happen, I charge you for the last minute cancellation. Genetic, even if they're sick. Now everybody gets a one-time free. And like I said, if I can fill the appointment from my waiting list, if I can get you in later in the week. So I keep Friday open for exactly that reason. So if our appointment's on Tuesday and you woke up with a fever and you feel like crap and you can't even do a phone session, then I'll schedule you for Friday. And if you've used your one free time already, then yes, I do. And I know stuff comes up, but we all know that those kinds of things tend to come up over and over again with the people that they come up for. So, I make it so easy and so flexible. I'm trying to think what else. The being late, it's your money. Although I have a teenager that's inevitably late, and so I text them and I call them, and I've had to set the boundary as, look, I'm going to wait 20 minutes. But it's absolutely not fair to think that you can just wake up a half an hour after this session started and I'm going to be sitting there waiting for you. I'll wait 20 minutes. It's also not my job to call you and text you. You are, in this case, 19 years old. You can be responsible or take responsibility for this. So I think these are the kinds of things when you talk about boundaries, it's usually not the really gross, overt ones like the guy who asked, said we could go out. it's usually these kind of things that are more professional lines, you know, that you have to dictate. There was another, I had a supervisee once, whose client would call and say, I know we're scheduled for this afternoon, but I really would rather come in tomorrow morning. Can I come in tomorrow morning? Or, you know, every single week they would rearrange their schedule. And I said, it's generally not, I mean, you know, when you get busy, you're not that flexible. And I personally think that as a professional, you have to set the tone for your practice and what that looks like. And remember, even therapists, people will treat you the way you allow them to treat you. So if you allow them to pull your chains, they're going to pull your chains. You had COVID and your therapist offered. I mean, yeah. Obviously, when there's a national pandemic, somebody's in a car accident, I don't charge them for those things. But if you forget to set your alarm, I'm charging you. Listen, don't forget, if you guys have any interest in the retreat, go to my website, ThisIsLeslyn. In the header, it's the This Is Me weekend retreat. And I would love, if you have any interest, just fill out the form and let me know what is interesting to you, because I'm very excited about the itinerary, and I've got a couple of sponsors that are contributing really cool gifts. So yeah, I think it's going to be fun, and super growth oriented. So please check it out. I'm going to make some content about it, about self-awareness. And Lily, go to my website. If you have interest, go to my website, fill out the form. I know, Care. I would like to do them in the Maritimes of Canada. But seriously, ThisIsLeslyn.com. In the header, there's a retreat link. Read through the page, fill out the form. You're not committing yourself to anything. I'm just trying to get an indication of interest in the various dates and time slots. So, peace out, you guys. Have a great week. I'll see you Thursday night. Take care.